Hi, my name is Aaron Curtis, and my presentation or my research project has been on quantum computing. I've created a slideshow that I'll be sharing and going through with you here in just a moment to go over some of the things that I've learned, some of the things I found interesting, etc. Um, but I wanted to introduce myself and tell you why I chose quantum computing. And if you see my daughter's hand coming into the screen somewhere right over here in just a moment, she's trying to get in. Oh, there she is. Um, this is my daughter Abby, and
I'm his favorite daughter.
she says she's my favorite daughter, but no, I love my kids. Sorry for that interruption. But getting back to business, quantum computing, it's just something that calls your attention. I'm a network engineer. I do a lot of switching, routing. I'll get into server admin, and a lot of all of these devices have a computing factor to them where they take in information, do something with it, and then spit it out. And quantum computing has always been interesting to me because of these fantastic ideas here. Oh, we're going to be able to do this with quantum computing. We're going to be able to cure cancer. We're going to be able to, um, grow back the rainforest. Blah, 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 millions of things that you hear, and it's just something that was interesting to me. So that's why I chose quantum computing. And without further ado, I've got to share my screen here, uh, into quantum computing. So, quantum computing, my name's Aaron Curtis. I wanted to start with a couple of common terms or basic key terms with quantum computing. And these are the three probably most common terms you hear. You'll Any article you read about quantum computing, you will hear these things. The first one is, and how I'll do this, I'll give the term, give the more formal definition, and then give you a brief example. Entanglement. Entanglement is the interaction between pairs or groups that cannot be explained independently of the other group or pair. I apologize for that. I couldn't reach the mute button in time. And my example is tides. We see here on Earth that if you're out near the ocean, you'll see the water rise and fall throughout the day, and it's fairly regular. But without knowing the cause, you can't really explain tides very well without knowing what causes them. So you can't explain what tides are or their cause without independently of the moon and its gravity and what causes those tides. That's kind of the example that comes to mind for me to explain entanglement. Qubit, pretty simple. Qubit is an abbreviation. It's a quantum bit. A normal bit is on or off, a one or a zero. A qubit has more than two positions. Um, and we'll superposition. The next term actually has a lot to do with this more than one positions as well. And the example a lot of videos give are with a coin. A normal coin, when you're talking about a normal bit, is you can flip it and you get heads or tails. It's on or off. It's one or zero. It's just a flip. However, if you take that same coin and you put it on a table and you spin it on its axis, is it heads or tails? No. But does it have a state of being? Most definitely it does. It's neither or it's both. And so that's kind of that explains what a superposition is, as well as with a qubit. A superposition is just where a bit or particle can represent both a zero and a one, or neither. Now moving on to my next slide. This is actually a 20-minute video, and no, I'm not going to share the whole thing. This is one of the videos or one of the references I used for coming up. And the lady on the left, I apologize, I forget her name. She's a quantum computing physicist at IBM. And so this video is amazing. She goes through and explains quantum computing to 5 different levels of people. In this portion of the video, it's about a minute and a half. She's explaining quantum computing to a child. I think she's 7. And then later on in the video, she'll explain quantum computing to a teenager. Then she'll explain it to an undergrad, a college student. And then she'll explain it to a graduate student. And then she'll actually get into a conversation with another quantum computing professional. And so it's just a really interesting video. Altogether, I think it's about 20 minutes. If you have the time or the inkling of a desire, I encourage you to watch it. It's a really interesting video, and you can learn quite a bit. So without further ado, let's watch the scientist explain to this young lady. Oops, I apologize. That did not work the way I wanted it to. First off, I apologize. I set up this video last night to play from a specific spot, and if you could see me bouncing around, I was trying to get it to that spot, but by the time I was able to, it was already there, and so I apologize. I also apologize that I have several kids that are trying to get in the video, and they're just running around in the background. I apologize for that. Now, so I like that because, in all honesty, when it comes to quantum computing, most of us are probably at the knowledge level of quantum computing as that little, second grader, 7-year-old. And so I liked it. It goes into the very basics, explains a couple of aspects of it, and it also goes into some of the things that it can be used for. Now, thoughts and explanations. We hear that quantum computing is going to be marvelous. It's going to be wonderful. It's going to do all these wonderful things. It should, for example, you hear in movies, you hear occasionally that a butterfly beats its wings, and that, after causing multiple different issues, that little gust of wind causes pollen to fly up, causes something to sneeze, and it's an ever increasing row of dominoes that ends up causing a hurricane. And granted, that's a huge change, but the possibility of quantum computing is that it can predict something so complex, so far outside of the capacity of the human brain, that it may be able to tell us and help us be more predictive of tornadoes, earthquakes, hurricanes, etc., etc. Now, as I explained before, also, I'm a network engineer. I deal with IP addresses, and so when they talk about comparing bits to qubits, the comparison I made in my head was IPv4 addresses compared to the IPv6 addresses. And so IPv4, there's a total possibility of 4.2, 4.3 billion total IPv4 addresses. With IPv6, I don't even know the number. It's so monstrously large. I just couldn't even, I don't even know that how to count that high. But it's the comparison, knowing math, IPv4 goes 2 to 32. IPv6, you can get a total of 2 to the 128. So much more. And I bring this up because these qubits, they have additional positions available. Instead of just on or off, they have on, off, on and off, neither, and potentially more options. Now, that means that there's more memory available, there's more computing power. Now, I put in here computer memory, normal versus quantum. Now, if you look at your computer, and I think I am sharing my screen, so let's do this real quick, and I'll share an example on the task manager. You can see CPU, memory, disk, network, GPU. Memory is not the size of what I can store. It's actually the amount of, if we think about it in our brain, it's the amount of space in my computer's brain for thinking, essentially. And so with this capability oops, I apologize. With this capability of the qubits having multiple positions, it expands exponentially the amount of memory that a quantum computer can have. So your computer, your phone, a quantum computer will basically never run out of memory. And that's something I find really interesting. Now, moving on. This is a direct quote, and then we'll go on to a little bit more about this. I got this at the bottom. I'll just read the quote. When you arrange qubits this way, you can perform many calculations at the same time. It's talking about how the qubits can interrelate and how the formation of the qubits allow for greater memory. A regular computer tries to solve a problem the same way you might try to escape a maze, trying every possible corridor, turning back at dead ends until you eventually find the way out. But a quantum computer can try all of the paths at once, in effect, finding the shortcut. The reason this is exciting is because the possibilities get really crazy very quickly. If you linked a mere 1,000 qubits in a superposition, that would allow you to represent every number from 1 to 10 to the 300th power. The known universe has around 10 to the 78th to 10 to the 82nd atoms in it. This is a quote I found in one of the articles I previously read that it just didn't click until I actually reread it yesterday. And if you get a computer of that size that can possibly map and think and find every single path of every single atom in the known universe. It's just, my mind is blown thinking how powerful these things are, or better said, can be. Now, my thoughts on these. The fragility. The qubits are very fragile. It's very hard to run these calculations and to then check on them, I guess you could say, to verify them, to look at the results, to find the results. It oftentimes will completely disrupt the qubits when they're checked. Now, the other thing is, I know this 1,000 qubit thing sounds amazing. However, the largest reliable sized quantum computer right now is only about 6 qubits. We know that people aren't going to stop trying to build these things. They're not going to. They're going to continue to get better. They're going to get bigger, but it will take time. So there's just so much potential, and I think that potential is what gets a lot of people very excited about quantum computing. Now, something that in an article I read, and I'm going to switch. I'm going to give this next slide a preface before I switch to it, because once I switch to it, it's going to be obvious what I'm talking about. They are already coming up with some amazing, cool, interesting ideas, and in very small portions, in very controlled environments, proving some amazingly scientific ideas. And now moving on to the slide, they have actually been able to take atoms and using quantum computing, essentially reverse their time. They are using quantum computing, essentially finding a way to travel back in time, back to the future. And that is probably the coolest thing I've found about quantum computing. You don't think about it, but if there's a possibility to travel in time, quantum computing is going to find it. If there's a cure to the most difficult cancer, quantum computing is going to be able to find it. And I thoroughly super enjoyed looking into this subject. I don't know that I have the personal brain power to become a quantum physicist, to be able to get more into quantum computing, but it is something I do have the brain power to appreciate what it is and what it can become. And so I really enjoyed this. Thank you for the opportunity. And I'll finish my class now. Once again, I apologize for my kids in the background.